Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Haribol, 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 Nitai Gora Haribol. Nitai Gora Haribol, 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 Nitai Gora Haribol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Satya Shri Srimad. His Divine Loving Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Satya Shri Srimad. His Divine Loving Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. And Amacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki. Brajbhum Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki. Shri Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki. Purushottam Kshetra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki. Samavita Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Janitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So today we're reading from first canto, chapter 5, text 40. The verse is on the board. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtapraeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So the chapter is entitled Narada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Text 40. Tvam api adabra shruta vishrutam vibho apyabhatra tavishrutam vib samapyate yena vidam bubutsitam prakyahi dukhair muhur arditatmanam sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyatha tam apyadabhra shruta vishrutam vibho samapyate yena vidam bubhutsitam prakyahi dukhair muhurarditatmanam sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyatha tvam apyadabhra shruta vishrutam vibho samapyate yena vidam bubhutsitam prakyahi dukhair muhur arditatmanam sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyatha Vaishnavis, word for word translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tvam, your good soul, api, also, adhabra, vast, shruta, Vedic literatures, vishrutam, have heard also, vibho, of the Almighty, samapyate, satisfied, yena, by which, vidam, of the learned, bubhutsitam, who always desire to learn transcendental knowledge, prakyahi, describe, dukhai, by miseries, muhu, always, ardita atmanam, suffering mass of people, sanklesha, sufferings, nirvanam, mitigation, oshantina, do not get out of, anyatha, by other means. Translation. Please, therefore, describe the Almighty Lord's activities, which you've learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such misery. Responsibly, please. Please, therefore, describe the Almighty Lord's activities, which you have learned from by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Sri Narada Muni, from practical experience, definitely asserts that the prime solution of all problems of material work is to broadcast very widely the transcendental glories of the Supreme Lord. There are 4 classes of good men, and there are 4 classes of bad men also. The 4 classes of good men acknowledge the authority of the Almighty God, and therefore such good men, when they are in difficulty, when they are in need of money, when they are advanced in knowledge, and when they are inquisitive to know more and more about God, intuitively take shelter of the Lord. As such, Narada Ji advises Vyasadeva to broadcast the transcendental knowledge of God in terms of the vast Vedic knowledge which he had already attained. As far as the bad men are concerned, they are also 4 in number. Those who are simply addicted to the mode of progressive fruitive work, and thus are subjected to the accompanying miseries. Those who are simply addicted to vicious work for sense satisfaction, and so suffer the consequence. Those who are materially very much advanced in knowledge, but who suffer because they do not have the sense to acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord, and the class of men who are known as atheists, and who therefore purposely hate the very name of God, although they are always in difficulty. Sri Narada Ji advised Vyasadeva to describe the glories of the Lord, just to do good to all 8 classes of men, both good and bad. Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore not meant for any particular class of men or sect. It is for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 1st canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada's Instruction on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamala Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha E Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'm shaking and I'm not sure if it's because I'm cold or if I'm nervous. But my mind is definitely telling me it's because I'm nervous, because I can feel some vibrations going on in my brain. Too much stress. So one time Prabhupada was giving class and a drunken man just randomly walked into the temple, walked past them, and then went straight into the toilet and just put a roll of toilet paper there. And then he walked back out. And Prabhupada was like, just see, his devotional services started just by randomly walking into the temple and just leaving a piece of toilet paper, a roll of toilet paper in the toilet. He's doing devotional service. So I feel like that drunken man just randomly walking into the assembly of the devotees and then just doing a little piece of work, just sitting on a Vyasa and trying to share my measly realizations. But I'm hoping that Prabhupada's mercy, he will accept this as devotional service, and by your mercy also I can get purified, even though whatever I'm about to share may be very limited compared to what you all know about the Bhagavatam. So I'm a drunken man, but I hope to become sober by the end of this class, having realized what I'm about to speak, because right now I haven't realized it. So I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas assembled. Mancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhyaevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So this section of Bhagavatam, this particular verse is very important because it's Narad Muni finally expressing what he's been trying to express all along. He's finally making his petition. Right? Like in the court of law, the lawyer will go on talking all these different things, but then eventually he'll make the point that this is what I'm trying to say. So this is the end of the chapter, and Narad Muni also makes the point. And here the point he's making is that Vyasadeva should broadcast the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam because he believes that Bhagavatam is the solution to all the problems of the world. Right? Now why is this? He gave his own example himself to prove the power of hearing the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. So we know the story of Narad Muni, how he was a demigod, and he fell down from his position because he was invited to a mela, and he was supposed to sing some kirtan, do kirtan, and instead he started singing some Bollywood songs. Let's explain. Some mundane songs. And the assembled devotees were so upset that they cursed him. You're behaving like a Shudra, then you should take birth as a Shudra. So he fell down from his position, and in his next life he became the son of a Shudrani. And from that point on, his life was pretty much pointless. He was living as a zero. But by the association of the devotees, he went from zero to hero. And all this because in that association, he got to serve the devotees, but what he said in his previous verses, the most important thing was that he not only served the devotees, but he also heard the pastimes of the Supreme Lord from the lips of those devotees. And by hearing these transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord, he got so purified that he eventually achieved the position of the transcendental spaceman, as Prabhupada often refers to him, Narad Muni, who gets to travel here and there and influence the life of so many people. If you were to count the number of people that Narad Muni made into devotees, right, and if you were to equate that to the number of books sold, Narad Muni would be the topmost book distributor because he's made so many devotees. He changed the life of Dhruva Maharaj. He changed the life of Valmiki. He changed the life of Vyasadeva, and he was in one way. Prahlad Maharaj, through his association, also became a devotee. So he became this person through the process of hearing the glories of the Supreme Lord. Right? So why is the Bhagavatam so important? Because of the transformational power of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is not an ordinary book. Sometimes people question the point that we make that the Bhagavatam is all you need. Because according to external vision, it's just a book with writing in it, just words. But it isn't an ordinary book. It's a book that's specially invested with the potency of the Supreme Lord. Right? Krishna swa dhamopagate dharma jnana dibi saha kalonashta drishamesha puranarko dunodita. Then Krishna knew that his time was up and he needed to leave something behind for the conditioned souls in this material world. He left the Bhagavatam for them to be able to still associate with him through the pastimes given within the Bhagavatam. Right? Bhagavatam offers something that other books does not offer. Bhagavatam establishes the position of the Supreme Lord, first of all, and then it goes on to establish the personality of the Supreme Lord. Then it establishes the nature of the material world and goes on to establish the position of the living entity within this material world and the result that will achieve when I become free from the material world. All of this is contained within the pages of the Bhagavatam. If you look at the first verse of Bhagavatam alone, the position of the Lord is given. See, when you want to understand who someone is, you can either get to know them as a person, but sometimes if you see too much of a person's intimate characteristics before you're actually familiar who they are as in the position, then it can lead to a familiarity. And sometimes when I'm preaching to people, and when we go straight to start talking about the personality of God, sometimes people label us as sentimentalist, or this is just some sectarian conception. Because you like this form of God, so therefore you're saying this is God. But when we start by talking about the position of this person we're about to describe, the way they control the world, then people appreciate that first, and then when we come to speak about their personality, people are much more open to the different nuances of their personality. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay, if it doesn't make sense, then there you go. But the point is, Bhagavatam starts off by talking about position of the Lord. So the first verse, Janmadhyasya yatonyaya taratas charteshu abhigyaswarat. The Lord is established as the absolute truth, right? He's the source of all that exists, and He is the supreme absolute truth. And this is very important because a lot of the problems in the material world, despite what people may say, stem from this basic principle, right? Atheism is the root cause of all problem. Because people believe there is no God in control, the world is meant for my enjoyment. And if the world is meant for my enjoyment, I can do whatever I like. I can abuse anybody I like. There is no one to tell me what to do because there is no God in control. So if you can get to a position of power before the next person, and if you do everything you can to remain in that position, just like the demoniac believe, Krishna explains, Damba, Darpa, you know, they think What's the translation? Forget the translation. Pride due to their acquisition, material acquisition, their power, their strength. Right? If I can use my power and my strength to dominate everyone else around me, then that's the goal of life. But when one understands that there is someone superior to me, and whatever position I have in this world, I only have it temporarily because I'm being allowed to have that position, then one acts in a much more responsible fashion and relates to the world in general in a much more responsible way, thereby improving their quality of life and the quality of life of everyone else around them. Right? So although people are looking for all sorts of reasons why the world is going through the turmoil society is going through at the moment, the basis of it is atheism. Right? They think living freely will make them happy, but actually it makes them more miserable and more dissatisfied. Right? But when one lives according to the laws of the Supreme Lord, then one develops qualities of goodness, purity, and ultimately the spiritual nature becomes uncovered. The soul is full of love, soul is full of compassion, soul is full of self-restraint. Right? So the way people deal with each other is much more loving and much more compassionate, and they're much more responsible in the way they interact with the world in general, even lower living entities. And as a result, material nature takes it easy on them and gives them access to the happiness that they're all seeking. But when they try to look for that happiness in a way which goes against the laws of nature, the laws of God, then they become offenders, and as such, they are punished by the laws of nature. So to the degree people become more religious, to that degree, everything will change in this world. Right? So the Bhagavatam explains, first of all, that there is a God. This God is the supreme controller of everything that exists. He's the source of everything. And that God is not just the supreme controller. He is a loving and affectionate, down-to-earth and approachable person. That to the degree one develops an intimate relationship with our Lord, then his supremacy, his godhood, takes a back step, and his sweetness comes to the forefront. Right? And this is also very significant because sometimes people have this notion of God being a kind of, at least in the Christian theology, like a person who's sitting in heaven and is waiting to smite anybody who breaks the rules and to send them to hell for eternity. But the Vedic conception, or the conception of the Bhagavatam, at least in the 10th canto, you see a God who plays the role of a subordinate to his devotees. He's prepared to put himself in a position lower than his devotees because he relishes more pleasure from doing that than he does controlling the world in general. You see? Everyone else is fighting and trying to be God, and here is God trying to be his devotee. And this is very significant because it shows how magnanimous he is. You can understand the magnanimity of a person when they have access to so much power, and despite that, they're able to bring themselves down to a lower position in order to be able to relate to the people on a lower level than them. When someone is small in nature, a little bit of control, a little bit of power makes them puffed up. And then you see them throwing their weight around. As we can see in the world in general, all the world leaders, the Trumps and these other guys, they've been put in a particular position due to their karma. And instead of using that position to serve the people in general, they're using that position to dominate and exercise so much control that they make the life of everyone else around them hellish. But here is Krishna, who's eternally God, the Supreme God. All he has to do is just think of something and immediately it happens. That's how much control he has. Sometimes we see these, we hear of these kind of criminal bosses. You know, people are so afraid of them that all they have to do is look at the person like that, and immediately, like, people may be talking and he looks around angry and everyone goes quiet because he has so much power. Krishna doesn't even have to look. He has to think, and immediately everything comes into motion. That's how powerful he is. But that same person can make anything happen like that. Comes down to a position subordinate to his devotees. In Vrindavan, when Nanda Maharaj tells Krishna to go and fetch his shoes, can you imagine that? He tells him to go and fetch his shoes, then Krishna goes running and takes the shoes of his devotees and puts them on his head and brings them to him. Right? That's how great Krishna is. So Bhagavatam explains this to awaken within the heart of the living entity this desire to want to serve the Lord even more. Right? Right? To awaken within the heart the desire to want to get to know this person even more. So that's the first thing that Bhagavatam gives us. The second thing that Bhagavatam gives us, it tells us the nature of this, of the living entity. Right? We are not the body, we are spirit souls living within the body. Right? And this world is not our home. This world is not our playground. This world is a reform facility that has been designed for the biggest criminals to come and reform their ways, right? So imagine you for some reason you end up in like a big jail, like in America, one of the most famous jails, Rikers Island. I think this is in New York. Like that's the place where they put all the most violent criminals. So you go to jail, and then you're there, you're supposed to do your time, and when you do your time, you leave. But for some reason, you end up in jail, and instead of being on your best behavior, what you do is you start to cause more problems in jail. You start to enjoy the facilities of jail. You start to argue with the attendants, even the governor of the prison. Then what would happen? They'll add more to your sentence, more time to your sentence, right? But when you understand the nature of your predicament, that I'm in a prison because I'm a criminal, and to the degree I cooperate with the authorities of the prison, to that degree I can get free quicker. Then you change your whole attitude, you change your whole approach, right? So in the same way, Bhagavatam, what it does is that it explains it describes the living entity's position, right? This is not your natural environment, and this material world is also, this material world is a prison, right? It's a hospital, prison, there's many ways it's described. And to the degree you behave nicely in this place, you get out of this place very quickly, right? And where do you go? You go back to the spiritual world, like that. So this is what Bhagavatam gives. Now if you compare that with other literatures, you don't get this. Even in the Vedas, these descriptions are not given as detailed as they are in the Bhagavatam, right? That's why Narada approached Vedavyas, and he told him that you have not described everything that there was to describe. You've not gone in as much details. You've compiled all the Vedic literatures, but you've not given as much as there was. But it's explained that actually Vyasadeva had already written Bhagavatam, right? It was part of the Puranas, Bhagavad Puran, but he didn't go in as much depth as he could have gone. So he was feeling dissatisfied. So when Narada Muni came to him, then he re-edited the Bhagavad Puran, and this is why we have this version here with the pastimes of the Lord in much more detail. And this particular Bhagavatam that we have, the pastimes of the Lord take a major portion, because through the mercy of Narada Muni, Vedavyas understood that if people forget everything else, but they remember the pastimes of the Lord, they would achieve perfection. But if they forget the pastimes of the Lord, but they remember all these other things, the result won't be the same. They may gradually, eventually come to that, but it will take longer if they're lucky. But if you give them the persons of the Lord directly, then the persons of the Lord have such potency that Krishna within the heart, provided the persons are heard with the right attitude, Krishna within the heart will purify that living entity, and it will take full responsibility for taking that living entity back to the spiritual world. Srimvatam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridyam Tasto Hiyabadrani, Vidunoti Surit Satam, Nashta Praeshu Abhadreshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttamashloke, Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. So by regularly hearing persons of the Supreme Lord, you know, what's the other verse from and this is 3rd canto. The Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj, what's that? Rasayana something. There's a verse. Satam prasangan virya samvido bhavanti rit karana rasayana kata. What's the next part? Tad josanat ashu apavarga varmani shradaratir bhaktir anukramishati. Correct? Yes? So by hearing the person of the Lord, the heart becomes filled with so much rasa. Right? Bhagavatam is called Rasa Alayam. Right? So it's like you have Vidyalaya, the place where knowledge is kept. Right? Rasa Alaya is the embodiment, the place where all rasas are kept. Another meaning of Alaya, Rasa Alaya, is that when you hear the rasas, you become intoxicated and you start to swoon over and you collapse because there's so much, right, within the Bhagavatam. So he understood this, so therefore he gave the person of the Supreme Lord. So here Narad Muni is saying that Vedavyas should just propagate this as much as possible, because two types of people will benefit. Those who are looking for God will become more enlivened, Mama Virya Sambhida, right? They get more encouragement, more potency, more inspiration. And those who are fallen and sinful and suffering, by hearing those pastimes, their consciousness will change. The point where they start to behave appropriately, they get purified and eventually achieve perfection when they uncover their original spiritual nature. Right? That's why Narad Muni is saying here to Vyasadeva that he should discuss the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Now, this is very, very significant for us as devotees. Generally, when I speak, I always like to bring a background to us as devotees. Now, some verses, some Prabhupada speaks, and it appears to be discussing the world in general, right? But sometimes he's speaking to the devotees, and sometimes it's implicit, sometimes it's explicit. Implicitly, what this means is that us as devotees who are hearing the pastimes of the Lord on a regular basis, we need to become fixed in this understanding that what we're being given is not ordinary. Now, why is that important? Because we're coming to Bhagavatam every day, so we're already doing it. But coming to Bhagavatam class and hearing Bhagavatam are two different things, right? I think once I already said it, it's like Prabhupada says that you may be in the vicinity of something, but that doesn't mean to say that you are intimately interacting with that thing, right? It's like a mosquito. Mosquito is biting the devotee. But that doesn't mean to say that a mosquito is getting sadhu sangha, right? In the same way, someone may come and sit in the Bhagavatam class. The sound may be going in and out of their ears, but it doesn't mean to say that they're actually hearing Bhagavatam, right? There's a difference. And what do we need to do in order to hear Bhagavatam properly? We need to be convinced of the position of the Bhagavatam. One does not come in contact with the Bhagavatam by accident. In Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that there are two kinds of piety, right? One is called Nitya and one is called Naimitika, right? Nitya Sukriti is basically that piety that brings you to the process of devotional service. And Naimitika Sukriti is that piety that takes you to the heavenly planets, right? That's temporary, right? So when you do some charitable work, or when you show compassion to someone, you're developing some piety. But that piety does not mean that you will come to devotional service. The only way you come to devotional service, there are two ways. He says through the association of devotees, or through the association of one of the angas of bhakti, whether accidentally or purposely. You come in contact with one of those things. And Bhagavatam is not different from Krishna, directly connected to bhakti, right? Because it's the Supreme Lord in the form of book, right? So one does not come in contact with the Bhagavatam by accident. You have to perform many lifetimes of past activities or receive the mercy of a devotee to come and sit down and hear the Bhagavatam. So in one way, we're already fortunate. But if we don't, if we don't appreciate our fortune where we build upon it, then what would happen is that we will eventually lose that fortune, because in our lives there are many elements fighting for our attention and fighting for our affection or whatever, attention, right? The material nature is also there and the spiritual nature is there. And jiva is called tatashta for a particular reason. You can either be under the shelter of the material nature or under the shelter of the spiritual nature. You can't be in the middle. So to the degree you're under the shelter of the spiritual nature, to that degree you're protected from material nature. Right? So to the degree we surrender to the Bhagavatam, to the degree we surrender to the process of devotional service, to that degree Maya can't touch us. So we can be in the class hearing Bhagavatam, apparently, but if we're not hearing it properly, then we're in Maya also. It's quite interesting. We're also in Maya. Huh? I think I mentioned this last time. I thought it was quite interesting. I read this somewhere, one devotee who studies Shastra, and he posted this verse, the one Acharya wrote. I can't remember the name of the Acharya. He's not one of the later Acharyas, but he says there that depending on the consciousness of the person who comes in contact with knowledge, right, the Shastra reciprocate. And if one is in the wrong consciousness, they may be in contact with Shastra, but it'll just be like an owl who in the daylight goes blind. So scriptures are supposed to give light and warmth, right? But if we come in contact with a scripture with a wrong consciousness, instead of seeing the truth, instead of seeing the light, we become ignorant, right? So you see sometimes devotees, they use the scriptures to push their agendas. Scriptures are supposed to elevate people's consciousness and bring Krishna to the forefront. But sometimes people use the scripture to push their agendas. And sometimes they know more scripture than the average sadhaka, right? They can quote so many verses, but they're not able to make the connection between those verses and the process of pure devotional service. Because within the heart, they have not developed that appreciation of what the scriptures are supposed to be used for. Right? They're using, so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in the context of the deity, he calls it using shalagram to crack nuts. Yes? So you're hearing Bhagavatam, but you're hearing Bhagavatam with the wrong intention. You're hearing Bhagavatam to further your materialistic desires rather than to purify yourself. So a very important point. So there's an art to hearing Bhagavatam, and if you look in the Shastras, many of the devotees who achieve perfection from hearing Bhagavatam follow the art, right? The absorption, how much are we absorbed in our day-to-day life, connecting everything that we do to the scriptures. You know, it isn't just about hearing it, but we have to bring it into reality also. Realization does not mean like something will just come from the sky and just land into our cerebral cortex and then we'll suddenly see Krishna or something like that. It doesn't work like that, despite what some bogus gurus say. Realization comes when we go through, painstakingly through the process of applying what we heard, no matter how challenging it is, right? So how do we know we're making advancement? How do we know we're hearing properly? To the degree we become detached from our material desires and attached to Krishna, to the degree we deal with the difficulties that Krishna, the material nature, sends our way in a Krishna conscious way, where we don't become bewildered by them to the point where we drop our devotional practice. To that degree, we know we're making advancement, right? And there's another verse also in the Bhagavatam that says that regulation, how we regulate our life, also has an impact in the way we hear the Bhagavatam. A lot of the time we think, okay, I'll come and I'll just hear and I'll be enough. No, because the mind is not an idiot. It's not just a case of coming and sitting and then in the Padmasana position and then suddenly everything will come in. They say that whatever we do before we come to Bhagavatam class reflects what we hear when we're in the Bhagavatam class. So this verse, Prabhupada alludes to it also in the purport. I took a picture because I wanted to, I think it's very important, at least for me anyway. Prabhupada says in his purport, he's paraphrasing his verse. I couldn't find the verse properly, but I found in one purport. This purport is on the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto. So Prabhupada says, one should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. Yes? So we're talking about paying attention, but you can't pay attention if your mind is not pure. And no one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. So you can't have a pure mind if you're spending your time, when you're not hearing Bhagavatam, engaging in activities that are disconnected from the purpose of the Bhagavatam. And no one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Right? So it goes all the way back, you know. It's not just coming to hear the Bhagavatam. Huh? I can share it with you later on properly. I just took a picture quickly. But I'll share it with you later on. I can find the exact reference for you later on. But yeah, 1st canto, 3rd chapter. That's what I was saying. I'll give it to you properly later on. It was a quick note. So yeah, the point is that. So now there's I was looking through and I heard a few, just for inspiration, there's one story about the power of hearing Krishna Katha. There was a prince. He was from a very wealthy family, obviously being a prince. And he was very unruly and very uncultured in the way he behaved. What he would often do is that he and his friends would often go on horse ride through the countryside. And sometimes what he would do is that whenever he's feeling tired, is that instead of getting down from his horse and drinking like everyone else, what he would do is that he will stay on the horse. While the horse is riding back, he put his hand into the water, and then whatever water splashes, he would drink it like that, because he was so extravagant, you know? Like he basically had no consideration because of his opulence. His opulence rendered him completely inconsiderate. So one time he was doing this, and then there was sadhu nearby. And somehow he splashed the sadhu also. And the sadhu was obviously very disturbed. And he said to him, "My dear boy, what are you doing? you know. You're drinking water just like an animal, like a bull. Were you a bull in your past life or something like that? And that was it. But those words of the sadhu entered the ears of the boy, and then suddenly he remembered that, yeah, it's true, I was a bull in my past life. And everything started coming back. He remembered he was a bull, and he used to spend time like he was serving sadhus and different things like that. And it turns out that this prince in his past life was a bull that was employed in the service of Madhvacharya and his associates. And whenever Madhvacharya would speak Krishna Katha to his sannyasi disciples, this bull would stop chewing, doing whatever he was doing, and just his ears would perk up and start listening attentively to whatever Madhvacharya was saying. So often Madhvacharya would glorify this bull, and he would say to his disciples, this bull will be the one who will eventually end up helping me propagate this science and process of devotion by writing so many commentaries. And many of his sannyasi disciples were feeling quite envious. This is an animal. We're giving our lives like renunciation, and this bull, he's glorifying this bull. It got to such a point that some of them even tried to kill the bull by poisoning him, right? Was it poison him, or I think snake bite, yeah. By getting a snake to bite the bull. So Madhvacharya could understand this. He knew that this was going to happen. So what he did is that through his potency, he reversed the curse. So when the time came for the snake to bite the bull, instead of biting the bull and the bull dying, the snake himself died. And when they saw this, the sannyasi disciples, they realized, wow, this must be a very special soul, because our Guru Maharaj went to such an extent to protect him. So time went by and the bull died of natural causes. And in the next life, this bull took birth in a family, in a royal family. And it was arranged by the Lord where he came in contact with this sadhu, who turned out to be none other than one of the greatest acharyas in the Madhvacharya line, called Akshobhya Tirtha. Right? And then Akshobhya Tirtha reminded him of his position. And when he remembered all this, he became, all his devotional sentiments came to the forefront, and he wanted to surrender his life to this Akshobhya Tirtha, but he couldn't because he was a prince. So his father arranged for him to get married, and somehow he got out of that position, and he ended up taking initiation from this Akshobhya Tirtha, and he got given the name of Jaya Tirtha. And he became one of the greatest acharyas in that line. He wrote so many commentaries on Madhvacharya's teachings, right? And this person was a bull who just happens to be in the vicinity while Krishna Katha was going on, and he just happened to hear it. And because of that, he took birth as a prince, and he again became a sadhu in his next life. And not just in his sadhu, he became one of the greatest acharyas in one of the greatest lines, the paramparas in Vaishnavism. So this is a power of hearing Krishna Katha. That an animal can take human form, and not just any human form, saintly human form. If an animal can get such a form, what to speak of us who are coming to hear Bhagavatam on a daily basis? How much more will we get out of that? But all this has to be done with the right consciousness and the right intention and application. Therefore, it's very important that this verse is taken seriously. Like every single verse in the Bhagavatam, every single purport is important. This one specifically is designed to bring out the potency of the Bhagavatam, where Narad Muni is illustrating our power through his own life, how he came to Krishna consciousness, by hearing and serving sadhus. And now he's telling Vyasadeva, you should share this knowledge with as many people as possible, because this will change their life dramatically. So this is what I got from this particular verse. There's so many things. Like I said, I'm just a drunkard, intoxicated with the material nature. But somehow I managed to walk into the temple room while the sadhus were there, and I put some toilet paper in a roll of toilet paper in the bathroom. So this is my little offering. And I hope that it's sufficient. And if there are any corrections or comments or questions, then this is the time for it. Are there any questions or comments? Anything was not satisfactory? Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you for the wonderful class. You mentioned that we should approach hearing Bhagavatam properly. But we know the statement that there is 5 most powerful process of devotional service, and hearing Bhagavatam is one of them. That they're so powerful that regardless that is the person understanding how it works, he doesn't understand, he still gets the benefit. How could you reconcile this?
See, it's the same with the holy name, right? The holy name is powerful, right? So if one does not know what they're chanting, they'll get a benefit. But if you're in a position to know what you're chanting, but you're still chanting properly, then that's offensive. You see? So when I'm saying this, I'm not saying that an innocent person coming to sit here won't get the benefit. But if a person who's supposed to have dedicated their life for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to the process of hearing, and consciously does not invest time to refine their relationship with the Bhagavatam, to go as deep as possible, then Krishna is thinking, what are you doing? And therefore that reciprocation slows down to the point where Krishna may even halt it to teach us a lesson. So it's very important. They says, I think Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj also writes this in one of his books, that the reaction from a sannyasi falling down is much more severe than just a new bhakta. Why? Because he's in a position of responsibility. He's supposed to know better. He's supposed to be, so it says it's much more serious. So one who already knows Bhagavatam, who knows the power of Bhagavatam, and is still not investing his time to hear Bhagavatam properly and worshiping the Bhagavatam the way it should be worshipped, after some time, Krishna will just close the door a little bit so that to intensify that desire again. Does that make sense? That is my understanding. Now, I don't know, perhaps Prabhuji, I've said something wrong that you'd like to correct or maybe add something? That makes sense? Yes? Okay. Any other question? So I will stop here. Padmapad Prabhu told me it should finish at 9 o'clock. It's 10 past 9. But what's a few minutes between friends? Huh? Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande.